There are a lot of legacy challenges associated with Medicaid Best Price. In my mind, they fall into three general buckets. First bucket is those challenges that apply across all therapy types. The second set of challenges are those that are specific to unique characteristics of therapies, such as orphan drugs, cell gene therapy, and the third are issues that arise from payment approach. An example of each is general issues. If you had a payer that had 100 members taking a particular therapy, if you set up a value-based contract under the old rules and one patient failed, where you would give a discount if a patient failed, let's just say it's binary, and you give 100% discount if a patient fails or they pay the full price. If out of those 100 patients, only one failed, that 0% price would set the best price for the entire Medicaid population. So that's an example of a general problem that applies across the board. The second issue related to therapy specifics, this is especially true for cell and orphan gene therapies, there's something what we call the small population problem. When you have a small set of patients, like 10 or less, for example, what happens is from quarter to quarter you can get significant volatility in the pool, the average of the price reported to Medicare. So it can bounce up and down quite a bit, which can be out of line with what the value of the therapy is, but also creates a tremendous amount of uncertainty for the manufacturer. The third set of issues relate to payment approaches, which these are especially true for new precision approaches, which are needed for cell and gene therapies. As an example, annuities, be it a straight annuity or performance-based annuity, you basically divide payment over time, right? Under the old rules, the first payment would set the best price. And so the legacy challenges really fall along those three lines. So let me begin by saying that the new rule is a first good step. Under the new rule, there are two basic approaches that are available. The first is a multiple best price approach, essentially where contracts, value-based contracts offered in the commercial market are directly offered to Medicaid. The second approach is known as the bundled sales approach. Under that approach, the price is averaged for a single contract in the market, and that price is reported as best price to Medicaid. Each approach has its own limitations, and our analysis, which will be published in the near term, takes a deeper dive at this. But what we found in a nutshell is that the bundled sales approach doesn't fundamentally solve the small patient problem. So basically the volatility issues that I discussed in your prior question about Medicaid still remain. So it's going to make it a less viable approach for developers. The multiple best price approach is not without its challenges. Every single contract offered in the commercial market needs to be reported to, offered to Medicaid, which begs the open question, how much is there going to be a standardized contract versus the flexibility that both payers and developers want? The second thing is under the new rules out published by Medicare, by CMS in the last couple of weeks, all these contracts are going to have to be executed by the states, similar to the way that supplemental agreements are implemented. Currently, 9 to 13 states, somewhere in that ballpark, have supplemental agreements, which raises the question of how many states are actually going to be able to directly participate, given that only a handful currently have those types of arrangements in place. We looked at a third option in our analysis, national pooling, and found that warrants further approach. It's basically expanding the bundled sales approach, whereas instead of looking at a single contract, you're bundling all contracts together in a given quarter. Yeah, great question. So value-based contracting and more broadly precision-based financing is required for gene therapies. There are three types of issues. One is the high cost that you mentioned up front. That particularly becomes problematic when you have a prevalent population waiting to be treated. Payment mechanisms such as annuities, and they can be linked to outcomes and be considered a value-based contract, offer to help ameliorate those types of issues. The second type of challenge is the durability question. Given the high upfront costs, there's a question, well, are the therapies really going to be effective 10 years down the road? And so value-based agreements help to mitigate that risk. The third type of issue is actuarial in nature and has to do with the predictability of having a patient. So when you have a small patient population, your odds of having a patient are quite low. And so predicting those expenses from a payer and employer standpoint can be quite challenging. And so there are precision approaches designed to deal with that. As I mentioned earlier, there are carve-outs where you can pay a per member per month flat fee to deal and basically put the financial responsibility with a third party. And so there is a need for all of those things in the market, and therefore Medicaid best price reform, so that patients can have access to these therapies.